We are joined, as we are each month, by Mayo Clinic neurologist and host of WJCT's Saturday program, What's Health Got to Do with It? Dr. Joe Sirven. Thanks for being here.
Oh, and happy April Fool's Day.
Happy April Fool's Day. We are celebrating without, I don't think I've gotten jinxed yet. Have you?
I have not yet, but the day's early,
The
right?
day is young, and I'm sure my producer's got something in store. Anyway, happy April Fool's Day. I want to start, if we can, with a story that you brought to my attention about the link between healthcare and climate change. It's a really unusual topic. A lot of people, I don't think, have heard of that before.
So this is, to be honest with you, as someone in healthcare, I didn't really think about this that often. We often so focus on energy industries like oil and gas and things of that sort, and have not considered healthcare's footprint, excuse me, on climate change. And the percentage, to what at least it's estimated, is pretty high, almost 8% of climate change concerns with regards to gas emissions, things of that sort, come from healthcare institutions. And if you think about it, it's interesting because healthcare has a lot of trash that occurs with it, not just the single use of a mask or some type of thing that you have to switch for each and every patient. The biggest part of the hospital that is involved in that climate change tends to be the OR surgical environment, because there's so much that you have to kind of have single use items for. And as a result, with that, coupled with the gases that you use for anesthesia, plus because these are bio type of products that are produced, you have to incinerate the trash or find other ways to get rid of it, just to make sure that it's safe out in the community. So this is one of those areas that I don't think we've talked a lot about what healthcare, particularly healthcare institutions, need to do to basically curb our use of products, if you will, to help climate, if you will.
It's interesting. I think anybody who's had someone in the hospital recently, they kind of noticed just the enormous amount of plastics, the enormous amount of things that are used and thrown and used and thrown. Even if there's anything left over that wasn't used, it gets thrown away because they can't be, reused or put into somebody else's room. But one thing that was interesting in this study was that there are some settings where they were saying it's not necessary to, for instance, use gloves. They said that there's about a patient is is associated with 100 gloves a day, basically, while they're in care, 100 sets of latex gloves. But that there's some post-operative situations where they're saying you don't even really need to wear gloves. People could just make do by just washing their hands.
And so this is where I think it opens up a lot of interesting opportunities to improve. One of the things that we see is that during COVID, it went from necessarily having to wash your hands all the time to using some type of alcohol sanitizer, which will, pretty much dissolve on skin and things of that sort. And that can, in essence, almost save water if you find that to be in the appropriate settings as the thing to do. But there are so many other things that, maybe new products or new approaches that we probably need to begin focusing on, just to help in this regard.
The surgical gases you kind of mentioned,
Yes.
but I was really shocked to learn that there are a couple of them, including nitrous oxide, which are terrible greenhouse gases. They really are some of the most polluting. And so what can be done? I mean, if you're in surgery, right? You need some sort of anesthetic.
Correct, but there are choices of anesthetics, and so that's where the innovation can arise. I think when I looked at the study that came out with this, I took it as like more of a hallmark of like, hey, do we think about this? This is something that really can kind of be something should be done about it to kind of get us to a better place for innovation. And so I think it's a call for innovation to really improve that type of footprint that we all leave. But it's now made me think about when I'm in the hospital, I'm like, oh wow, we really should be trying to be much more proactive in that regard. And I think they're trying to be as well.
Yeah, it did sound like that a lot of surgeons would be willing to change their
Yes.
practices, but most really didn't know how. And one of the ways that they suggested is separating true biohazardous material
Correct.
from things that are not necessarily needing that same treatment, because a lot of biohazardous material is incinerated, including plastics.
Right, and that's the issue. What is the other approach that we can take with this? Most of us, certainly in the medical side, I have not been necessarily educated in terms of how to do eco-friendly versions of things. And healthcare administrators, I hope that they are more trained in this regard because they're the ones kind of running that type of
Mm.
approach. But this is a call to action, and one that we should all be paying attention to because hospitals carry all of these items and they're not a minor contributor.
Yeah, significant. Another headline from the last couple weeks is a study that came out, an article that came out in the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA, saying that people need to start looking out for what they call predatory publishers. What are those?
So this is one that even got my attention as I saw this. Predatory journals are basically journals that a medical author can literally pay money towards, and that journal will just put anything out there on their platform. It's a way for these groups to make money. It doesn't even do peer review in some instances, and they will just take whoever wants to publish their money to put that in there. The problem that emerges with that, especially in the world of journalism and things of that sort, they go, well, according to a medical study published in Journal X. Well, if it's not a journal that you recognize and it's just some title, you could literally cite anything if you can publish anything. And that has become a surprising new issue in terms of almost a way of getting misinformation out there with with all the walls and fortresses of peer review, if you will, not peer review of getting it published, and that's what's kind of been concerning.
What explain to us why there is urgency on the part of physicians and researchers to get things published?
There's two ways. In order to establish scientific knowledge, it needs to be published in a peer reviewed medical journal. And that's always been literally the keys to getting from an idea to a new scientific fact, a clinical trial, a new therapy, a new diagnosis, or a terrible side effect or new problem. So that is one way. I mean, that's the whole medical profession. Its underpinning is based on all of these published pieces, if you will. It's also how you get promoted in academic medicine, how you get to play things like tenure or elevate in the ranks of academic medicine. So the more you published, especially in more prestigious journals, the more likely that you're able to obtain those ranks. So there's always, if especially if you're in the area of research or in academic medicine, publishing is the keys to a lot of things, scientific fact, but also personally to move up in the world of academic medicine. So there's always this zeal, if you will, to get things published no matter what.
And these specious journals now are branching out even into fake or so-called predatory conferences where they're doing a lot of advertising to get physicians to go to them. They're at these luxurious locations. The content is sort of ambiguous. There, again, no peer reviews on the stuff that's being covered. So who's profiting from that financially, and kind of who's benefiting just more big picture from these kinds of conferences?
So are these kind of almost companies that are kind of putting these things out there and they will basically take the money. It's almost like a scam, and publish these things out there, put it on any platform, which you can do digitally. You don't even have to print, and they take the money. So there is these groups that go out there and do this. I myself, I will never forget. I saw a note. So and so is speaking at a conference in Switzerland, and there was my name on it. And I said, well, I don't remember getting a trip to Zurich or anything along those lines. That sounds lovely. And then I called, and and I had to kind of actually get my institution involved to get my name taken off of it. I mean, they just literally put your name out. And I had no idea who these people were, and they were in another country.
Are these people, though, doing it just for a money-making effort, or are they trying to seed, bad science?
It's a little bit of both, but I think that the main driver for this is money. It's a way you can make this a cash cow, especially when you see how many people want to publish, not only in the United States but internationally. It's the same story, so that they will try to make this global and try to collect as much money as they can. Perhaps bad science, but I think it's more the money driver at this moment.
So how are people supposed to discern? I mean, JAMA wrote this story, but they didn't name names. They didn't say these are the bad science
Right.
journals that you should disregard.
So the bottom line is you have to look at this when you get a piece of information and it says from an X journal, look up the journal, see where they belong to. Do they have an impact factor? That is often the marker of a peer reviewed journal. That's the type of thing that gets monitored in the National Library of Medicine. Do Is it something that other scientists are there? That's, I'd say, the first step. You have to do that extra due diligence, if you will.
An impact factor basically meaning how often it's cited by other.
Correct.
Mhm.
The higher the impact factor, the more prestigious it's likely to be.
If you're just joining us, we're talking to Dr. Joe Sirven. He is a Mayo neurologist. He's the host of our WJCT program, What's Health Got to Do with It? And he is here to answer your questions about healthcare or medicine, or if you just need some advice, he's here. Give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can reach out on social media. I want to move to a topic sort of not unrelated in terms of, studies, how reliable they
Sure.
are. There is a man named David Geyer.
Yeah.
He has no medical degree. He is fairly discredited. He's been disciplined for practicing medicine without a license in Maryland. He's been chosen to lead the government's autism vaccine study. Um, he is somebody that has repeated debunked claims linking vaccines to autism. Uh, First of all, how surprising is it the fact that he's been chosen of all people to lead a study like this?
It's very surprising. This is someone this is a father-son team. So that the David is a geneticist, at least per his own listing. The father is a physician. They both, out of their basement in Maryland, had looked at autism and done research. They had lost, I think the father lost his license because of issues with regards to using unvalidated treatments for autism. And to have someone like that uh, be now a senior data analyst for a major government agency in charge of this topic, I'm not sure how to even begin to respond, but let's just say it's concerning.
I want to dig just a little deeper into that because you talk about the research that he did with his father. There was a lab that they ran
Yes.
basically out of the dad's basement. It was a wood paneled, wall to wall carpeted room that he said was a world class lab where they did their research. And they were giving injections of Lupron to kids that may or may not have correct diagnoses of autism. And they did so under the guise that they were um, perhaps suffering from precocious puberty.
See, this is the type of thing that gets you so concerned because things like that, where you are giving kids hormone type of treatment, you have to have that done under close FDA supervision, a clinical trial, looking at side effects. It has to be done with all the safety levers around it. To do that, it's almost preying on people who are vulnerable, and that is just a terrible place for anything to be. It just breaks my heart. Conditions like autism and others often get a lot of folks to do certain type of treatment options that are unproven. Something like that, where you're doing injections, that there's a real risk of harm to people, and that's just wrong.
Some of the reporting on Geyer has also talked about the kind of research that he's done. And I think it's worth pointing out because there are studies that have been debunked that have linked vaccines to higher rates of autism. Their study found that, um, and the reason that it was ultimately debunked was that they were saying that kids with more vaccines appeared to have higher, risk of autism or rates of autism. But in fact, it was, what the science showed was that they were looking at kids who were older
Right.
and had more vaccines. And kids who have autism are typically diagnosed when they're a little older, closer to age 5, for instance, than age 2. So they would accumulate vaccinations over that time, but it wasn't necessarily a causation.
And that is where you run into, like, huge problems when you do not account for all of the variables, with relationships, when you're looking between 2 things, whether they are connected or not. In that particular study, they did not account for age. And age is huge because in kids, at certain points, you can see the development of a certain condition, regardless of whether you're vaccinating or not vaccinating. So you may just be simply seeing that at age 5, that's when the problem is likely to occur, versus that's also happens to be the same time you get vaccinated. So if you don't account for age, you can come up with any type of specious type of connection without any point to it. And that's why you need professionals and folks that are very trusting, that understand the kind of all the variables that are out there in order to make good conclusions. Otherwise, you can conclude anything you want without accounting for things, and all you end up with is bad science.
So that kind of dovetails with another topic, which is measles,
Oh
the
dear, yeah.
ongoing measles outbreak. As of the 28th, which I think is the last day that we had some good data, there are 483 measles cases in 20 states. That is, more than in all of 2024. It still sounds like, kind of a small number to people who are used to, you know, hundreds of thousands of COVID diagnoses. So, can you explain why it would be concerning that there's fewer than 500 measles diagnoses?
So it gets us back to how infectious a person with measles is, in terms of spreading it to others. So for every person with measles, it has the potential to spread it to 18 other people. So you take those 500 and then you now do almost a logarithmic multiplication for 18 for each of those people, and each of those people 18.
How does that compare to something like COVID that we consider so contagious?
COVID was closer to 2 people per individual
Oh.
versus to 18. Measles is the most contagious virus that is known to humankind, period, for at least until something else comes out. But measles is that contagious, and so when you have an outbreak, with that number of people, it can easily go viral, pun intended, throughout the US. And mind you, in one of those cases in the DC area, one of the measles cases, the person was riding Amtrak. Another one was in Dulles Airport.
Oh, wow.
It does not take much to get that to spread to a lot of other people.
And, measles can be uncomfortable. It can be dangerous, especially for children, but it can also cause some really long term impacts, neurological kind of impacts. I mean, talk a little bit about that because we're mostly focused right now on the here and now.
Right. So what can occur is that in some cases, and it's a small number, so I'll give you that, there can be literally what's called an encephalitis. That is an inflammation, infection of the brain. And as a result, it can leave a mark, especially in a young child where they're developmentally delayed as a result, because you have literally a brain infection
Mm.
that occurs with this. This can have huge impact for learning growth in the future. And although it is not common, why should someone be subjected to that? Because ultimately, it is so preventable. That's the part here that I really feel the passion for. This is preventable. We do not need to be doing this because this is occurring in unvaccinated folks.
A report this week that really surprised some, ProPublica did an investigation that found that the Centers for Disease Control had ordered its staff this week not to release an expert assessment about the risk of catching measles. It found that obviously it was highest in the areas where vaccination rates were lagging, and it would have emphasized the importance of getting vaccines. And this agency, again, helmed by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is a powerful voice in the anti-vax movement. What does it suggest about the state of the CDC that they're pulling back on messaging about vaccines?
It's concerning, is probably the easiest way to describe that, because we turn to the CDC to get our latest medical facts through their various programs and all that they collect the data from. When you're getting kind of a mixed message, that starts to say, will I be able to trust this over time? And that I think would be the worst outcome from all of this. But it just makes you just wary suddenly that you have to double check everything that you're reading, if you will, especially if it's coming from certain agencies. So far, they're still putting out materials that everyone is in agreement with, but it just makes you kind of concerned as to what the future may look like.
If they're pulling back on releasing information.
Correct.
We know that the administration is planning to cut about 2,100 jobs from the CDC, but, you talk about trusting the information from the CDC website. Another bit of related, RFK information this week was that his nonprofit anti-vax group, Children's Health Defense, actually created a fake CDC page. They posted a page that mimicked the official site in every respect, typeface and logos, and layout, except that it offered a suggestion that vaccines cause autism.
Again, this is one of those areas that it just gets you just so angry and frustrated because you're hurting people in that regard. Fortunately, that was taken down, and all that means is that we all have to be very vigilant in this regards. Vaccines are still a good thing.
Yeah. We're talking to Dr. Joe Sirven about the week's headlines and, well, really kind of the month's headlines in medical news. And we are taking your calls and questions. If you have um, either, you can call us 904-549-2937. You can also email First Coast Connect at WJCT.org. Related to the measles issue, uh, the question of vitamin A and taking
Yeah.
vitamin A as a treatment or a prophylactic of some kind, that's something that, again, has been advocated by the head of HHS, the Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. This is something, though, that has resulted in some unintended consequences. Tell us what's happening with vitamin A.
So, vitamin A, in some cases of measles, when you are vitamin A deficient, which would more likely happen when you are living in a country outside the US, it can be actually helpful in terms of recovery because it'll help the immune system and things of that sort. So, I know that they've latched on, especially in kids when they're in the hospital and in the throes of measles. Some have given vitamin A, and so that's not a wrong thing to do. However, to say that vitamin A is going to stop the measles is wrong. It's You still have to deal with the prevention. That's still the way to avoid this. The thing about vitamin A is that it isn't just like people always think of vitamin and think of your Flintstones and you take it and it's going to be fine and all that stuff. There is toxicity associated with some vitamins. It can cause problems with vision or other type of symptoms, and you can become vitamin A toxic. And that is a real thing. Ultimately, that is one of the issues is that when people who have measles start taking vitamin A willy nilly, if you're deficient, of course, that's a good idea. But our diets actually are pretty good in terms of maintaining it. And we are not known to be vitamin A deficient in the US. But that is something that is done in some measles cases for those who have that trouble.
And so they're actually seeing some patients that are exhibiting some of the signs of vitamin A toxicity. What
In
what are those
And
signs?
so typically you'll have some visual problems. There can be anemia when you look at the blood count. You look at the liver enzymes. You may find some of these things on laboratory testing that you may not always exhibit it easily, but it's there and it's something that has to be monitored carefully because you do not want to run into a very serious issue. This is not a minor point to be toxic.
So if you're concerned about, contracting measles, perhaps you are unvaccinated or you don't recall if you've been vaccinated or when the last time you were vaccinated, what would you recommend on vitamin A?
I would say unless you are truly deficient, talk to your primary care doctor, talk to your provider. They know what to tell you. That's who you have the relationship with. They will, if you need the vaccine, they can get it for you. If you're not sure, they can even run a titer, which is to see if you had enough antibodies in you to if you're exposed. That's the type of thing that you really need to sit there with your physician and your provider and sort through that. But I would say I'd hold off on the vitamin A right now.
Yeah. We've got a question from Susan on Facebook. She says, recently somebody was on the show talking about suing doctors who were negligent. I'm about to get a colonoscopy and they want me to sign a release form acknowledging that I know something can go wrong. What is your opinion on those forms? Why don't doctors lose their license when they are sued for negligence and lose?
Well, so here's I can answer part of that question, Susan. So that's a very good point. I will say that in any type of procedure, people need to know the risks and the benefits, and part of that type of writing that out is a way to say you're aware of the risks; those were explained to you, and that you're okay to proceed with it. If someone is negligent, like they literally did something purposefully wrong or just it was just wrong, that should be decided by a court or some arbitration to figure that out. On the other hand, if it was just a complication, well, everything nothing is zero risk in medicine or
Hmm.
in life for that matter. So in that regard, that kind of helps to protect the other person because there are folks that will immediately on any type of problem sue a physician. I'm not saying that they shouldn't in every case, but I'm just saying that it's protect both sides in that regard. So to me, when I hear about that form, it's just a way to just have a rethink the decision about what's the risk, what's the benefit here.
I do want to talk about a piece of good news
I
this
love
week because
that.
I feel like we've been sort of hitting some of the harder headlines. This is about the power of teddy bears. Tell us what we're learning about stuffed animals and what benefits they can offer.
I love this. This was a story that was put out by the folks at CNN, and they looked at how the number of plush toy sales at places like Build-A-Bear have increased significantly since COVID. Uh, there were 2 points about this. Number one is that in 20% of those sales are going to adults, people who don't have kids, which is telling you something about the stuffed animals that people are kind of gravitating to it. From a psychological standpoint, there's two elements that's going on here. People look at stuffed animals as nostalgia and it's comfort. It's a way of just self-soothing. And one of the things I loved about the piece was the fact that even from an evolutionary standpoint, we all like to be cuddled or kind of placed in a situation where when you're holding on to the stuffed animal, it just makes you feel better about life or more protected, and it helps people sleep a little better, and it helps their just whole mental well-being.
Extraordinary. And they're actually selling, I guess, some weighted stuffed animals now that kind of, I guess are extra cuddleable.
Let's just say that I'm not going to admit to anything on air about my sleeping habits, but they're not a bad thing to do on occasion, right
There are always a lot of, teddy bears at the hospital. People.
I one of the things I've always noticed is that when I'm in a hospital environment, and I get this, and it didn't hit me till I read this story, is how many people have their own blanket with them. Typically, an NFL team or a baseball team, or they bring their favorite pillow, or a stuffed animal in some cases, and. I'm not a pediatrician, so I'm tells you the age of the people that I'm seeing that were carrying this. But I get it. When you're in the midst of some sort of life-changing therapy, why not bring a little bit of home, or your past with you, and it makes you feel better.
Grab a teddy bear. Well, Dr. Joe, you're here today, in fact, this morning, because you are going to be here this afternoon. You are hosting a lunch and learn event at WJCT Studios. And we're also joined now by David Luckin, who is our executive producer. Uh, um, host of Electro Lounge, all
uh,
around station guru.
all that silly stuff.
What is going on here? Usually, the lunch and learns are kind of like an educational thing where people get a nice lunch, they get to learn about some sort of medical news or research.
Right.
But this is a little bit different. Where are you going with this?
We thought we'd just bring people in, and like you said, often we have the disease of the month, and we learn about it and try and avoid it. And we thought for April Fools, we would do a lunch and laugh, and we'll forget all the
There you go.
sickness, and we will realize how important laughter is as medicine. So Dr. Joe is going to do a short open, and all you folks at home, you've got time. We're going to start at 11:30, so get in your car, come on down. We're going to show a film. It's one of the most famous screwball comedies ever. We can't mention the name for contractual reasons, but believe me, it's really funny. You will laugh a lot. You will feel good when you come down and see this film, and Joe will set it up for us.
Laughter is truly the best medicine, and the best thing I can tell you is that this is unlimited refills and no copay. So it's all
There
good.
you go.
This
And you will laugh.
it's a screwball comedy. Are
Yeah.
you able to give us any clues about either the era?
It's probably the most famous one. It came out in 1938, and there was a movie made years later just like it, which we can't mention either. Just come on down. Trust us.
Yeah.
All the films we're showing, you can trust us, even if you don't know what they are. This is all part of film at WJCT Studios. We just kind of mashed it up with a little lunch and learn for April Fool's Day and give everyone a little break from the serious. And
We've been
make
trying to
them
do the
laugh.
films in part to pick up the absence created by the loss of Sunray and Peter
Absolutely.
Jackson. So this
Yep.
is
It's another
yeah.
exactly
San
and a
Marco, I mean,
matinee, which
theater.
is kind of nice.
Exactly.
And we'll show a classic.
People do need to sign up though, right? I mean, just to get a lunch on the
WJCT.org/events. It's $5. I'm sorry, I forgot to say that for this one. Usually lunch and learn is free, but since we're showing a film and it actually cost us money, so $5. Come on down. You're gonna laugh. It's gonna be the best thing you do all day.
All right. Well, it can't go wrong if you've got David Luckin and Dr. Joe Sirven involved. I
We are
will say.
looking forward to it.
All right. Thanks so much for being here, you guys. Appreciate
My
it.
pleasure.
Thank you, Ann.
All right.